directions, followed the directions, your papers were really good. And a lot of times when I'm in a meeting with other professors, I hear them complain about how students don't know how to write nowadays. But I didn't see that at all. I thought y'all were generally pretty good writers. And you should know that you probably felt how impossible it is to ever get a paper perfect. But that's the same way with everyone. Whenever you read anything written by me, if it's in a scientific journal or book or magazine, a technical editor edits it for me. It's impossible for me to get them perfect too. Almost everything you've written that's an official publication by any professor, it's been technical edited. So for that reason, I certainly did demand perfection. I honestly thought that most of y'all were given the paper as part of the job and had hours and days to work on it. You could have had it near perfect. And most of you write very clear stuff. And most of you follow directions pretty well too. So I was very pleased with the paper. I thought very high. I'm using the board mostly today. That's why I'm not bringing the announcements down for the important things. For that today, remember I asked you to print off those worksheets for today? That's what we're going to be doing today. To get those worksheets out about demand.
Did you print them out? I did. Do you want to write stuff down that he says?
Sure. You write on your notes that this refers to a worksheet for today, and say when we answer number one, just write one on a blank sheet of paper and write what the answer is. Then you can go back and look at the worksheets and you'll be fine. Homework 14 is due April 8th at midnight. Homework 15 is due April 10th. Y'all ready? Yeah. I'm sorry? I don't know if all of them have posted. Christmas here, let's start with like homework. The ones y'all are posted. Are y'all doing great homework?
Oh, I sent it online. Yeah. He said 15, homework 15 isn't available on D2L. He needs to do.
Oh, do you not see it? Thank you for telling me. I must have got the exact one. Thank you. You ready? Hey! I like that. You're my new wingman. Can I give you a nickname? Sure. Brutus. Man, if I had a horse like that, I'd be getting all kinds of respect. Now I'm scared. My ears. All those muscles in the ears are protected. Now you start working them out. Yeah. Always. Today we're going to be talking about something called, I almost took one of this, so next week. Well, let me get appreciate your It's a reallocation, redistribution for good today. What I've given you are 2 pages from my friend, you saw Jason Lusk, agriculture economics professor in our department, on the Stossel program in the show. And you saw him on the Stossel show talk a little bit about fat taxes. And I've shown you an excerpt, what I handed out is an excerpt from his book talking about fat taxes. And we're going to use that as an example to illustrate a very important concept called demand elasticities. Now real quick, raise your hand if you ever watched the Sean Hannity show. Jason Lusk is going to be on the Hannity show April 15th. He's going to be on The Morning Joe, which I think is MSNBC, like morning or 15th or 16th, something like that. He's going to be on the Dennis Miller radio show. Big time. My career plan was I came here and I just grabbed the back of his shirt and I'm just along for the ride. Okay, what I want to do is read parts of this book. Now, I want to warn you beforehand, Just because everything we're doing today is going to suggest that fat taxes don't work, and just because we're going to express a very cynical view of politics, doesn't mean that there aren't many things we could do as far as government to improve health. We're just not going to cover that today. I can't do everything. I'm going to start on page 146 at the third paragraph down. So I'm just going to read it out loud, page 146, third paragraph down. One of the weapons the fat warriors have been yearning to wield is the ubiquitous fat tax. Writing in the New York Times, Mark Bittman calls for the government to tax things like soda, French fries, donuts, hyper-processed snacks. In his book, The World is Fat, Barry Hopkins says that he wants to change our eating patterns through taxation. For almost 20 years, Yale professor Kelly Bramwell has promoted the so-called Twinkie tax. Politicians have taken the bait. More than 21 states have already have taxes that specifically target soda. I'm going to skip to the next paragraph on page 147. With all the hubbub surrounding the various incarnations of the fat tax, one would think there must be a lot of evidence that it would work. Think again. Time after time, economists have shown that fat taxes will have trivial effects on weight. USDA economists estimate that a small tax on salty snacks would have a very small dietary impact. Even a larger tax would not appreciably affect overall dietary quality of the average consumer. A group of Berkeley economists concluded that even a 10% tax on fat would reduce fat consumption by less than a percentage point. A recent study in Health Economics reported that a whopping 20% tax on sugar-sweetened beverages would reduce weight by only a paltry 2 pounds. Reporting in that same journal, I calculate that people would have to be willing to pay an astounding $1,500 per pound of weight loss for this kind of tax to make sense. Another study analyzed obesity rates across locations with various soda tax policies and found existing taxes on soda do not substantially affect overall levels of soda consumption on obesity rates. Fat taxes don't work because food purchases are rather insensitive to price changes. I want you to circle that word insensitive in that last sentence. Where it says fat taxes don't work because food purchases are rather insensitive. And I'm going to tell you another word, and I want you to draw arrows connecting insensitive and inelastic. So you've got insensitive. You've got a circle. And what it means is that when you tax fatty stuff and the price of fatty stuff goes up, consumers are insensitive to that price increase, which means they don't reduce consumption of fatty stuff by much. So tax them a lot, they still eat it. Another way of saying insensitive is inelastic. I want you to put that in the text. What we're going to be studying today and maybe Monday is demand elasticity. And elasticity is just our word for consumers' sensitivity to price changes. That's all it is. Now what we're going to do today is not just important for economists analyzing policies. If you're a lobbyist and you want to argue against a fat tax, you can find studies that show they don't work. Use the word elasticity in a congressional hearing and try to avoid a fat tax. If you're a lawyer and you want to sue someone for a fat tax, we're not doing it. Lawyers often have to use the concept of inelasticity demand when they make arguments. Now, you could say that, well, politicians are just doing a fat tax because they don't know any better. Of course, not all politicians. Let's say the ones who really want a fat tax, you could say they just don't know any better or they don't believe economists, what economists say matters. Or there's another explanation. I want you to turn to the next page. And on the back of that page, I'm looking at page 149. And I'm going to show you an argument that Jason gives that I think has some validity. Probably doesn't explain all of it, but has some kernel of truth there. So again, I'm on page 149. the first new paragraph on that page. Despite all the evidence against fat taxes, the food police are undeterred. Why? Because they know that taxes bring in revenue to grow the size of government. As the Berkeley economist put it, a fat tax is an effective means to raise revenue. So now we've seen two reasons for a fat tax. A politician may want a fat tax to make you eat less fatty stuff, or a politician may want a fat tax so he can have more revenues to spend. But they can't do both. They can either achieve one or the other. And whichever one they achieve depends on whether demand for fats or inelastic or elastic. If it's inelastic, so the fat tax doesn't deter consumption, but it will get politicians a lot of revenue. And as an illustration of why this might be true, at the bottom of page 149, in the last sentence where he gives an analogy to the taxes applied to cigarettes, presumably to keep people from smoking so much, the last sentence of page 149 says, remember too that only about 2% of the funds from the tobacco settlement, which were promised to fight smoking, actually went for that purpose. The state spent the rest to fix budget shortfalls. So, for taxes on cigarette companies or lawsuits of them, you could say you're trying to punish the companies to get them to sell less cigarettes, get you to buy less cigarettes, or you could say the government just wants more money. Both of them are probably true at the same time. It depends on the politician. What we're concerned about is using this concept of elasticity to say, well, when can a fat tax raise lots of money, and when will it deter consumption? Getting there requires us to talk about elasticity and do some stuff that's frankly really boring. And it even bores me to have to teach it. But it is, I wouldn't do this unless other people expected you to be able to know it down the road if it wasn't very important. And what we're doing today is, when it comes to homeworks or exams, everything that I test you on is going to come straight from these worksheets. And because it's scoring, this is something you can kind of gloss over and not want to look at, but I encourage you to really take it seriously, make sure you get good notes. And when we're practicing, make sure you really try and work the problems. Now I'm looking at the worksheets. These are worksheets that say at the top, AgriCon 1114, worksheet on supply and demand elasticities. Number one, we're just doing a primer. We're going to be talking a lot about percent changes. I know that a lot of you already know this, but I can guarantee if I gave number one to everybody in this class, about 20-30% wouldn't be able to answer. So I want to make sure we can do this. Number one says that the sales of a product decrease from 50,000 to 35,000 per year. So sales fall from 50K to 35K. What is the percent change? That's the question. We want to know the percent change in sales, Q for quantity sales. Always, in percent changes, you take the new value, so the new quantity minus the old quantity divided by the old quantity. And when we do that, we find the sales fall 30%. Number two, we're going to the elasticities. And what I'm always going to do, I'm just going to give you the elasticities. We're not going to talk that much about where it comes from. That can be for other classes. Number two says, suppose that the demand elasticity for a feed supplement is negative 0.25. I know that's not supposed to mean anything to you yet. If price falls 15%, what is percent change in quantity demanded? Remember, demand elasticities tell us how sensitive people are to price changes. But specifically, this is what they do. Percent change in quantity demanded. This is a formula I'm just giving you. It tells us the definition of an elasticity. We know price falls 15%. So percent change in P, percent change in price. In a minute, I'm going to plug in negative 15% right there. What an elasticity tells you, it lets you take the percent change in price, multiply it by the elasticity, and it tells you the percent change in consumer purchases. So that's what it does. I'm not going to ever ask you for the specific definition, but a demand elasticity tells you the percent change in quantity demanded for every 1% change in price. And when we do the calculations for this, I tell you that the demand elasticity is negative 0.25. I tell you the price falls 15%, negative 15%, and we're going to get 3.75%. Price falls, so people buy more. I don't think you need to write this down. Just know you could have, instead of 15, put 0.15, and then over here you would have just gotten 0.0375. Now, I've got a lot of space under this problem because I wanted us to write some stuff together. Help tell us a little bit about what the demand elasticity is. Just in case you look back later at this and you don't even know, say, what is that demand elasticity? What is that ED thing? That is just the demand elasticity. Demand elasticity is always going to be less than 0. Give you an idea why. I recently read a history book on Scientology. This is a quote from, where they're talking about some things. L. Ron Hubbard, founder of Scientology, weird guy. Hope they don't sue me. All of these Scientology organizations were bleeding money. Perhaps it was time to try a different approach. They should create a company. This new organization, a clinic of sorts, would see clients. Shrewdly, Hubbard anticipated that, and this is the important part, the more they charged, the more popular they might become. Hubbard told O'Brien he'd seen it happen. Charge enough, and we'd be swamped. Now, usually when we think about price going up, we think people buy less. Now, sometimes you think of some counterexamples. I imagine what Hubbard was saying. I'm not a Scientologist, by the way. Imagine what he was saying. If you charge a really high price, people are going to assume that it's really high quality. Just like when you go into a wine store, if you see a cheap wine and a really expensive wine, you're going to assume that really expensive wine is a lot better. But that's not the kind of price change we're talking about, because that's where you change price and quality changes with it. We're talking about number 2, a feed supplement where the same product, exactly the same product, now goes for a higher price. And that's why our demand curves always look like this. Demand curves slope downward. When you go from a high price to a lower price, people buy more. When you go from a low price to a high price, people buy less. The only way people buy less when price goes up is if that demand elasticity is negative. That's what it will always be negative. And then I just want to put a few sentences about exactly what elasticity is. some things we've said, but I want to make sure we get it on paper. Like we said, demand elasticity measures how sensitive consumers are to price changes. Instead of using the words sensitive and insensitive, we're going to use the words elastic and inelastic. So an elastic demand is going to be the case when the demand elasticity is less than -1. So like -2, -3, -10. An elastic demand means people buy a lot less when prices rise, if they're very sensitive to price changes, and inelastic and an inelastic demand is when the elasticity is going to be greater than -1, less than 0. So in between -1 and 0. Means they buy only a little less. So elastic demand means people buy a lot less. Lot is the key word. A lot less when prices rise. And inelastic demand means they buy only a little less. Elastic sensitive, inelastic insensitive. I'm going to come back to number 3. I want to skip that for now. And by the way, although there is no chapter in the online textbook corresponding to this, in that chapter with the videos of supply and demand, there is a lot of elasticity stuff in it. It tells you what it means, where it comes from, things like that. Number 4. I've given you the answer to number 4 in what we just wrote down. So if the demand elasticity for soda is -0.2, -0.2 is between -1 and 0. We say demand is going to be inelastic. Whereas if its elasticity was -2, that's less than -1, we say the demand is elastic. So the answer to number 4 is A. Inelastic, elastic. Number 4, answer equals A. I know that from what we just wrote up. Number 5. I'm just going to give you the answer, then I'm going to talk about it. Answer is inelastic. Inelastic. Part of that question has to do with supply. I'm just telling you the answer. We're not worried about supply right now, though. What number 5 did, it showed you a graph of 2 demand curves and it asks you which one is inelastic, which one is elastic. And their answer said that D2, now notice something, it's almost a vertical line. This means when prices go up, say a price goes up from here to here, consumers do decrease their purchases, but only a little bit. So with that demand curve, consumers are very insensitive to price changes, which means D2 is inelastic. And there's also a D1 in there. Notice it's like you took that inelastic curve and you stretched it out, you made it more elastic. That is the elastic. D1 is an elastic demand. If you look at it and you think about what happens when price rises, the price goes from here, it's just a small price rise, consumer purchases fall by a lot. So the demand curve D1, it shows consumer purchases fall a lot for even a small price change, which means consumers are very sensitive to price changes in D1 for elastic demand curve. There is a point to all this. It's boring, I know, but there is a point. I think now would be a good time to get to that point. I'm going to skip number 6. We will come back to it, and I want to go to number 7. Now for number 7, I've got a lot of blank space below it. That's because I want us to draw some graphs and take some notes. And I'm going to kind of sketch out what I'm going to do up here so you can see how much room you need to use in your I'm going to have 3 graphs, 3 like supply and demand graphs, and under 2, I'm going to write some stuff above and below each one. So I'm going to have one right here. It's all going to be quantity on the x-axis, price on the y-axis. And for these last 2, you're going to want to draw them as identical as you can. It doesn't have to be identical, but you want them to be similar. I'd suggest putting these 2 side by side, these last 2 side by side. Just going to be like scenario A, scenario B. Now I'm going to walk almost identical demand curves. I'm sorry, almost identical supply curves here. In this first graph here, I'm just going to have one supply curve, and we're going to have a supply curve decreasing, a decrease in supply due to a tax. We have one supply curve, and we have a decrease in supply. Just like we've been doing with all the quicker things the last 2 weeks. Decrease in supply, the supply curve shifts up or to the left, however you want to think about it. Up. And this tax, we're going to let it be like the fat tax. You want to think about it like this. It doesn't matter who you actually tax. You can tax the consumer right at the end or the producer in the beginning. Either way, it's the producer that takes the money from the consumer and pays a certain amount to the government. So I'm representing it as a tax on producers. You could say it's a tax on consumers, but it ends up being the exact same thing. I always say here is when you tax producers, their cost goes up because now they have to pay a tax. At any price, they'll produce less, so it'll decrease the supply. Good. Now for these two curves, I want us to start off by drawing an identical supply curve. Doesn't have to be perfectly identical, just get them looking very, very similar. Then I'm going to draw some demand curves. But over here, I'm going to have an inelastic demand. Over here, I'm going to have an elastic demand. Now I'm going to go to my inelastic demand and draw the curve. Here's how I always remember how to draw an inelastic. Inelastic begins with the letter I. So I is just a straight up and down line. So I want my demand curve to be close to a straight up and down line. So I draw it. Almost vertical line. You can draw it even more vertical. Then for the elastic demand, needs to be the opposite. Instead of straight up and down, instead of being almost a vertical line, it's almost a horizontal line. I'm really going to exaggerate something like this. That is an elastic. We're imagining a fat tax. Two scenarios. One, what is the demand for fatty foods was inelastic, or what if it was elastic? This is the equilibrium before the tax. Now we're going to have a tax. So what I want to do is I want to have a decrease in supply like here, but I want an identical tax in the inelastic and elastic diagrams. So what I want to do is come in here and draw a decrease in supply, the supply curve higher up, but I want that shift to be almost identical for both graphs, which means for me, that's S prime after the tax. And then I want to make it look very similar over here. These graphs tell us the effect of a tax cut. I'm sorry, a tax on fatty foods. In this equilibrium, we go from here to here, from there to there. In this equilibrium, we go from there. Then we want to say, what was the impact of this? By how much did consumption decrease? Over here on the inelastic demand, we see that I'm going to write the price increase was large and the quantity decrease was small. Over here, price went up a lot, quantity only decreased a little bit. This is what my friend Jason was actually saying was happening with the fat tax. They implemented it, but it turns out that demand was actually very inelastic. He used the word insensitive because most people don't know the word. What happened to demand was really inelastic, and it didn't have much effect other than increased prices a lot. Over here, the price increase was small, and the quantity decrease large. Some of the politicians who did the fat tax, including Sweden, they were hoping this would be the case. You put a tax on the stuff, and in response, consumption falls apart. Here we're getting to the lessons. Two main things we want to see. Remember we said the purpose of the fat tax could be to deter consumption, or it could be to raise tax revenues. For the inelastic demand, we saw that it doesn't deter consumption. Doesn't deter consumption much, doesn't decrease consumption much. But it does raise large tax revenues. The reason I say that is this. If you're government and you tax something, like a per unit tax, the only way that's going to make a lot of money is if people buy that thing, right? If you tax something and nobody buys it, then you don't raise any tax revenue. But if you go out and you tax cigarettes or you tax beer, people still buy lots of it, which means you still get lots of money. So here the fat tax, you tax it, people still buy almost the same amount, so you're raising a lot of revenue. You get a certain amount of tax for each unit consumed. This is why we think that if politicians know what they're doing, and if everybody agrees that the demand for fatty foods is inelastic, the purpose of the fat tax is not to deter consumption, but to raise tax revenue. I don't know if that's the truth or not, but. And then B, you get the opposite result. With an elastic demand, you do decrease consumption a lot, but you raise few revenues. Tax the good, people consume a lot, but because they're not consuming it near as much, you're not bringing in all that much tax revenue. And now this leads us to number 7, our answer to it. It says the government is considering taxing sodas and fatty foods. Politicians say they are trying to curb obesity, when in reality, they are just trying to raise tax revenue. Suppose we know that to be the case. We're insiders. To achieve their goals, these politicians should keep in mind that the answer is C. That if the tax is placed on a good with an elastic demand, they will deter consumption so much that little tax revenues will be raised. A and B, you don't even know what that means. You know, D's not right. It says if the tax is good, if the tax is placed on a good with elastic demand, consumers will purchase virtually the same amount, generating large revenues. That describes this graph, and that's for an inelastic demand. That's why the answer number 7 is C. Again, this doesn't mean there aren't some things government could do that actually improves health and doesn't do that. Just don't ever think just because the intention of the state of taxes to do something, that that's the real goal. Can you announce it's time for clickers?
It's time for clickers. Get them out.
that, and I'll just get it from you.
Okay, I'll print it out and design and get it back to you on Monday. If I don't see you this weekend.
Most of you were correct. The idea is if a sow is happy, that can make me happy, but other people can also be happy for that same action. No reason just because I'm happy that a sow's happy that you can't be either. The idea here is if I buy, say, crate-free pork, and it makes the sow happy, and that makes me happy, that's the good I get, and it makes you happy, I can't stop you from being happy. Even though I was the one who purchased it, I can't stop you from enjoying that too. I can't go charge you. I cannot exclude you from consuming that good. Better. Remember, this doesn't mean the pork chop itself is a public good, just the animal welfare benefit that was created from crate-free pork. That's just the animal welfare part is a public good. You thought I didn't notice those 3 days, did you? You do want to vote on this, even if you think it's mean for me to pose this question. Did anybody not have enough time? I think everybody did. I'm going to reload it. Everybody vote again. I don't know, should we see the answer? Yeah. You don't think that's me? No.